Hey everyone, and welcome to this video where I wanted to take a chance to speak about flow states, and not only for studio, but actually also how flow states in music production I think can also guide us in everyday life. And since it's so beautiful out today and everything's in bloom, I decided not to do this one from the studio because I don't need any technical tools for this. So we're going to be breaking down this topic in three parts. The first part's going to be about sort of the body, mind and spirit connection and how these are important for you to be able to enter a flow state. The second part is the technical aspects of, let's call it DAW overhead, technical overhead, of making sure things are working well in your DAW and are ready to go. And the third one is about learning to connect and trust with your intuition and starting to uncover and feel sort of the ebb and flow that life is often trying to show us. I think it's actually always trying to show us where it is that we should be applying our energy and how is the best way to be in the moment and let that moment takes us where we need to be. As you may have seen, we've started the Flow Collective, our online school, which is focused on flow state music production. And through teaching that, a lot of things also have become more and more clear. And I want to share some of the basic concepts behind this with you because I think this is valuable for any musician. So the first thing that I think is really essential for a flow state to be able to happen is to have a regulated nervous system. This may seem a bit like, how is this related to music production? But I think if we're in a state of stress or exhaustion or fight or flight type energy, it's very difficult to actually allow these flow states to come to us and to actually hold the space and energy for that to be able to, connect to you and then to be in it and then allow things to smoothly develop from one to the other. So as I'm saying this, I'm realizing maybe it's helpful to actually define a little bit what flow states are. In my experience, this is when one makes one decision which leads to the next decision to the next, which are all somehow working together in a great way and which very quickly bring you to something that you either envisioned or that in that moment wants to come through you, which in the case of music production is like a really cool idea for a track or a melody or a groove that really works, and that leading to the next thing and to the next thing. Now, why I think that that's difficult to hold if you're in kind of a stressed out state is because our mind basically distracts us and makes us focus sometimes on things that are actually not that relevant, like thinking maybe I need to find a better snare sample and then spending 45 minutes looking for snare samples only to wind back to what you had going in the first place. So it's, in my opinion, where flow states really happen is when our mind is more in the background and we are in a physical experience of just letting things happen, and we don't second guess things too much. And this is kind of where also the element of speed comes into it, because it just all starts to flow naturally. And in many cases, actually, you'll hear, people that do sports or people that do also more like extreme sports type stuff, is that these flow states happen often when they're at the edge of what they can achieve naturally and just like going a little bit beyond that and not letting your mind and your doubts kind of get in between that because you're too busy navigating everything. And actually, a high-tech music production studio, which is what we all have, it's very easy to get into a place where you're like, whoa, what's happening here? But actually just being able to stay with that and going further can very much lead to these kinds of amazing sessions where everything just feels inspired and like it's happening in a really organic, great way. Now, there's some techniques to make sure that your nervous system is regulated. For example, meditation, yoga, sports, swimming, fitness, all these kinds of things I think are super helpful to make sure that you can hold that energy and bring it in. So spending a bit of time on these things, going for a walk in nature before you go into the studio can also be super helpful for this. So if you're looking to go more into flow states like this, those are the physical kind of body-driven topics I think that are important. Having some sort of a meditation awareness practice helps, I think, tremendously for this. But the other part of this, which is kind of almost feels like the opposite, is making sure that there is no huge technical friction and things that make you leave the composition and kind of creation phase and keep pulling you back into like left brain activity where it's about, why isn't that synth playing? Why is this sounding weird? Why is there hiss or hum? So having all these kinds of technical issues solved before you start a composition session, I think is massively helpful. And spending maybe half a day before you're planning a creative phase on debugging your studio and making sure that you have all the tools installed and up to date that you're going to need, that everything is responding, that all the signals are coming in cleanly, I think is a big part also of making all that happen in a way where flow states can actually take place. The other thing that I think is essential for this is having access to sounds and workflows that inspire you without a lot of manual steps to get them going. So creating yourself like a pre-selected sound of presets that you know are reliable for making the kinds of basses or leads or pads that you love. Or in our case, when we're working with the rapid flow workflows, having a template where everything's already pre-mixed and mastered and sounding loud, and if it sounds good and clean, when you record it, you already know immediately that's how it's going to sound in your final track because you're recording through everything. That also is hugely helpful because it removes all the technical friction of having to load like an EQ, a compressor, maybe a saturation, maybe an envelope shaper. If all that stuff is already present in the workflow that you're using for your music creation, all of that technical overhead falls away and you can stay focused on your idea. And I think that's actually huge and a really big part of why sometimes I can sit in the studio for 3-4 hours and at the end of it come out with something that feels like 80% of a track is already there. And so these are some recommendations that I can give you on this. And the final, I think, super important aspect of all this is trusting your taste and creative ability and ideas and just going into them without thinking of whether or not this is going to appeal to someone, whether it's going to be potentially commercially successful, whether it suits, whatever preconceived idea you may have of what, your music should sound like, and actually just following your intuition on what is the thing that wants to happen next, which will then again create the foundation for the next thing that you can build on top of that. So not second guessing yourself so much, not being too concerned with sort of the outer world, but just really going deep within and experiencing what's there and just allowing that to come into the DAW fluently is a huge part, I think, also of achieving that. Some practical tips to condense this and kind of make this actionable if this is stuff that you want to go for. One is before you start in the studio, get yourself in a place where you're feeling comfortable, happy, relaxed, kind of centered, whether that be through sports or walk in nature or yoga or working with someone in the studio that inspires you and that you vibe with positively. Those are, I think, the kinds of aspects that are the preparation. So body, mind, being kind of in sync and in balance. Then, as I mentioned, the technical aspects of making sure that, your tools are working, that you know exactly where everything is, that you're producing in an environment in the DAW where, or maybe even in hardware, where everything is just working together well. That's a huge other part of it. And then, not making too many left brain processes during the creation phase, but just diving deep into the creation phase. And if something's not happening, moving on to the next thing quickly will help you from going down some rabbit hole where you feel like you need to analyze a problem rather than let inspiration work through you. So I hope that this video is helpful. If you want to learn more about this, then let me know. I'm happy to also share more about this. We do have the Track in an Hour series on the channel, which we will link below, which very much shows that process of coming up with an idea and then, writing all the parts and then creating a sequence, everything in about an hour. Some of those tracks actually have gone on to be released. So yeah, absolutely doable. And actually I find creation in this flow state very exhilarating and elevating and a super cool thing to experience. So if you want to know more about this, let me know in the comments below. Please do share what are the things that you do to achieve this flow state, whether it be in music or elsewhere. And that reminds me that actually that's something that I also wanted to chat about, and that is that learning how to be in this flow state, in this state of trusting your intuition to apply in a creative process is actually something also that is very easy and kind of natural to then also apply to your daily life. So in many cases, my personality has very much been in the past that I like to kind of drive through things and make sure things get done, and making sure that everything's under control in a certain way and that things keep pushing forward. And what I've more and more come to now over the years is that I'll put out the feelers or suggest something out there, and then I'll trust either my team who I'm working with, or sometimes it's artists that I'm going to record something with, to follow up and do their part of the execution of that. And if they do it and everything keeps flowing, that's great. If they don't, then it is what it is, and it just wasn't meant to happen in that moment. And there's a fine balance between letting go too much and making sure things stay on track. But I think the more we allow our intuition and sort of the natural flow and ebb of things to work through us, and we work with that, actually, the easier it is for this to become something that gets kind of like a dynamo move, where it gets more and more of it in your life, and it actually becomes easier to trust these flow states and to let them work through you and become a part of your daily life, not only in the studio, but also related to everything else you may be doing with your work, with your family, with other things that you want to do. I think pushing too hard against something to move it forward, or pulling too hard, is not the same as comfortably going along for the ride and enjoying the process, even if sometimes maybe mentally it feels slow. But there is seasons for everything, and things sometimes need to be slow, and sometimes things don't work out, and being able to accept that and moving on quickly to the next thing where you could potentially experience a flow state, I think is a really great way to more and more come into this thing where it's a self-enforcing mechanism. And what I found is I've learned to trust my intuition more and more on these topics, so that I can feel now when I'm pushing something, or when actually I'm letting go just enough so that it can manifest and kind of do its thing. All right, I hope that this has been an interesting video, even if it's a little bit left field maybe, and a bit of a nature video, but I just wanted to share this with you because it's become so beautiful here now in the springtime. It's so great to see nature coming back to life after what was a very, very wet and cold winter. And yeah, I hope this video helps you for your next studio session. If you want to know more about this, check out the Flow Collective, which is still going to be running for another 2 months. And I'll see you on the next video. Take it easy. Bye-bye.